Morning friends, it's Heather at Bush Poppy Farm. I hope you're doing well today. It is Wednesday, and today we're going to be getting our tomatoes and peppers into the garden. So Monday and Tuesday, I actually did do a whole lot of work, but it was a very busy 2 days with lots of appointments and meetings interspersed with garden time, and so I had a hard time doing any kind of filming. Yesterday, my bee mentor came over, and it was a nice warm day. I think it was 75 degrees Fahrenheit. It was beautiful, bright and sunny, and no wind. So we did a hive dive on both of my hives. Now, the Demeter hive is my original hive that survived the winter. That's the hive that I harvested 6 frames of honey from. And what I did last week was I put those frames that I had harvested from that were still wet with honey back into the hive, doing something called under-supering. So when I took the original 6 frames out, I gave them 6 new frames that had drawn combs so they could continue to fill those, right? So it wasn't an empty box. They still had 10 frames in their honey super. And so what I did then is I got a new honey super, a second one, and I put the 6 wet frames from the harvest in there with 4 other fresh frames of they were undrawn, so fresh frames. And then I did what's called under supering. So I put that new super under the original one. And the original one is now so full of honey, and it's only been a few weeks. So full of honey, it's really hard to lift. So later this week, probably on Friday, I need to go in and harvest more honey. But they have plenty of room. We investigated the top box. We were going to go into both boxes. I have 2 deep boxes there for brood and 2 honey supers on it. So we were going to go into the bottom box as well. But in the top box, number one, we saw the queen. She was walking around, actively walking around while we were doing some really invasive stuff, because they have built really funky comb in there and lots of big clunky drone brood chambers and stuff like that. So we had to scrape off a whole lot, and it was really invasive. So we decided not to go into the bottom box because they'd already been disturbed enough. However, they were fairly chill. I mean, we weren't getting stung too much. I didn't get stung at all. Jamie got a little bit on his hands, but they were fairly chill. So we put that all back together, and then we checked the Persephone hive, which is the one I made the split from, and it was a successful split. There are eggs and larvae and capped brood in there. We did not see a queen, but we know she's in there because we wouldn't have all those stages of laying if there wasn't a queen. So successful. And I gave the Persephone hive, that's the new one, because right now, up to this point, it was just 1 deep box. So I gave them a second deep box. And then in a week or so, I will put a queen excluder on and give them a honey super. So they're doing great. Both hives are doing great. I may have to change out the deep box, that top deep box on the Persephone hive, to all new frames. If they continue to build funky comb, I may just start them over with fresh frames, because it's very weird. And it makes it hard to get the frames in and out because they'll build big chunky pieces along the frames instead of nice flat comb. So it's weird. Anyway, they're doing well. So that was yesterday. That was a couple of hours. And today it's going to be quite warm. Almost 80 degrees Fahrenheit, which is about 30 degrees more. No, 25 degrees more than it usually is this time of year. And I've been hardening off all the tomatoes, so they are ready to go in the ground. We're going to get those in. And I also have some starts of corn that I'm going to plant as well. I direct sowed a whole bunch of corn, and not very much of it has come up. And so I am going to put in some starts because my beans are starting to come up, and I don't want the beans to get bigger than the corn. The corn has to have a head start on the beans. So that's good. I direct sowed more squashes out there. So we have a whole garden full of different types of winter squash and summer squash. I also put cucumbers. I also direct sowed cucumbers on a cucumber trellis. So I'll show you all that this afternoon. Right now, I am sitting at the old farm at Fish Ranch because I'm going to meet the new renters here. They reached out to me and asked if I would show up today and walk them through the irrigation that I left here for new renters. So it's kind of crazy to look over right now. It's so overgrown with Scotch broom and poison hemlock, and oh, it's awful. If it was me, I wouldn't want to come in and start with this, even though that's what I started with when I first got the property here. Yeah, so I'll meet with them and then we'll head home and get started on the front garden. Now, tomorrow is Dahlia Day. Tomorrow we go back to the farm, and I'm going to finish the string trimming first. My string trimmer is busted. I took it apart. I couldn't get it to work. There was nothing in there. I thought there was something in there keeping it from sucking up the string to get a new string going. So I've done everything that the manual suggests, and I think we're just going to have to replace that. But I can still use it. It still works. It's just that it won't take a big long string and bring it all in, wrap it all up. So what I'm going to do is literally cut, keep feeding in string and cutting it to the size that it needs to be to string trim. And as that gets too small, and since I won't be able to advance, I'll just add a new piece. So I can at least get the farm finished string trimming tomorrow. And then we're going to break ground on the dahlia bed. And that's going to be a deeply dug bed next to the sweet pea bed. So I'm looking forward to that. The dahlia tubers that I pre-sprouted are going crazy. They are ready to go in the ground. Lots of green growth. And then I have a bunch of dahlias that are in boxes that I haven't even opened yet, that came in the mail like 3 weeks ago. So they definitely need to go in too. So that's got to happen. Usually I get the dahlias in the ground by the beginning of May. So I'm not super far behind on that, but I also have a lot of things to transplant. Zinnias and more feverfew and marigolds. And then we're having a shipment coming soon of all the starts of the wedding collection that I bought that will give me all of my secondary flowers soon. So lots to do, lots of fun stuff to do. And I'm looking forward to it. So, all right, well, I'm going to go have this meeting and then I'll pick back up with you at the garden at home. And we'll talk about how we're going to be setting up these tomatoes and where we're putting them in. So it's much later in the day and it's hot. It's not that hot. It's actually quite lovely, but I'm hot. So I have laid out my tomatoes where I'm going to put them. I haven't laid out the peppers yet, although they're out here in their flats. And I'll show you roughly where they're going to go. But I do have maps from Seed Time that I printed off where I labeled everything. So you don't have to worry because even though there won't be labels going in the ground, it's labeled online on a map and I can just look on there and find out which tomato is which. I will still put the labels that they have in the ground with them, but they're little wooden labels and they won't last the season. So let's start with this row right here. So this is going to be my main row of tomatoes that will be in the Florida weave method, and it should be pretty easy here because it's a very short run. So I'll put a T-post on either end, and then these will be staked in with string back and forth in figure 8 style. I'll show you. These are going to all knock over in the wind. So we've got the varieties in here are Brown Sugar, Harvest Moon, and one called JTO, which is a Johnny's variety. We've got 2 pole sweeties. Now these are going to need major support, so I'm going to rig up a little teepee here for them because they are big time climbers. This area is mostly going to stay empty, I think, because I've got a lot of squashes in here, pumpkins and stuff, and I want to make sure they have space. But then down here, and once these radishes come out, other stuff will go in. But we've got a row of Amish paste and 2 Berkeley tie-dye. We have some determinate tomatoes, so bush varieties. These 2 on the outside are Ace 55, and then I have a cream sausage. And then there will be peppers going in back here. Once these potatoes come out, I'll put other stuff in. I'm not sure, maybe more beans. There's nothing in this middle section right now, but I don't want to get my tomatoes too close to the potatoes. I want to have plenty of room so I can dig them up. Over here, we have 2 peppers. There's going to be another one right here that got eaten by a rat, but there's going to be a new one there. There will be some peppers in this bed since the beets didn't take. The beans are starting to come up in the front. All of these radishes will eventually go away, but you can see the beans are starting here. And then I direct sowed cucumber seeds under here on this side of the trellis. And the reason I only did one side is that in a couple of weeks, I will sow a different variety on the other side so that I can have a succession of cucumbers. This is going to stay relatively empty too because, I mean, it looks empty now, but there are 3 squash plants here if they survive taking a beating. And I want to give them big space. They are zucchini rampicante, so they'll get big, hopefully. These guys are still in for now. At some point, they're going to start to bolt, so we'll just eat them for the leaves, not for cabbage heads. But these are collards, and they're staying until we're ready. Okay, and again, the cucumbers here that are planted, and there's okra seeded in here, obviously hasn't germinated yet. I am going to put some lettuce starts just along the front here in between the sweet alyssum and that rogue onion because there's beans all along here. Here's the corn starts that I'm going to put in. Most of the corn I planted either got eaten or didn't germinate or whatever, so I'm going to go ahead and put these in. I want them to be, they're both different varieties that mature at different times, so I won't have to worry about cross-pollination. And then the other day I came in and I direct sowed some more squashes so that I can make sure I have enough, the ones that survive. There's 3 Seminole squash here and they're just looking rough, so I want to make sure I get enough. And I put a crookneck yellow squash there, there's a butternut there. Yeah, more sown up that way. So I want to plant some of these lettuces here just to have something on the edge and using up that space with that drip line, and then get these corn sowed in. And this bed is going to be tomatoes as well, but right now I've got some good lettuces going, so I'm going to leave these here until they're done. So I'm only going to sow the back half with tomatoes, and actually I might keep this arrangement because when these tomatoes get big, they will shade this part of the bed, which would be great for summer grown lettuces. Otherwise they don't survive here because it just gets too hot and sunny. So if this part of the bed is shaded, then I can grow more lettuce. And so I think I'm going to do that. So up here, I've got a couple different varieties. I've got Berkeley Tie-Dye, Brown Sugar, Celebrity Plus, and Harvest Moon and Moscovich. So I've got more marigolds to put in. I will add some more alyssum because that's great for tomatoes, and also some more. I'm also going to add some basil. And then the peppers, for the most part, are going to go in this bed. But you can see I need to pull out all the tulips. I need to amend the bed. So they're sitting here in their trays. They're not going to go in today. They're looking pretty good though. So I'm hoping that nothing tries to get them overnight. And I mean, we've been doing okay, but I'm still always anxious that I'm going to come out and find some things missing. So hopefully this weekend I'll get this bed amended so that we can get these peppers in the ground. The varieties here are Black Hungarian, California Wonder, which is a bell pepper, Shishitos, Craig's Grande Jalapeno, Megatron Jalapeno, Cachucha, can't see what all these are, Paseo Bajío, and Sugar Rush Peach, I think are yeah. So lots of varieties of peppers, and we are going to kind of cram them in here, but they're going to be okay. I have put a lot in this bed before. It's a 4x4 bed. I like having them in a raised bed. They just seem to do better for me than when they're directly in the ground. So that's the plan for tomatoes and peppers. Whew, it's hot. I'm not my body hasn't adapted yet to warm weather. Okay, I'm also still waiting on my sweet potato slips to come, and when they come, they're going to go in these grow bags. And then will be mostly planted out, I think. Except, you know, once the peas are done, I'll switch those out for other things. I've got, like I said, I have a crop plan and I'm gonna stick with it. In other news, these apples are getting bigger, so maybe they did get pollinated. However, I have found that sometimes they'll get bigger and bigger and then all of a sudden they'll just abort from the plant, so I'm not gonna count my chickens till they're hatched. But one thing I will do in a month or so is thin. I don't want to stress this plant. I actually should not even let it fruit at all this year. Technically, I should be taking every fruit off of this because I just planted it, but I'm greedy. So what I'm going to do is make sure that, and none of these little spurs get too weighted down by too many fruits. So I'll probably thin it back to maybe 1 fruit or 2 fruits per spur. To make sure that I don't break any branches. But this tree looks good, it looks healthy, it's putting on fresh growth as well as fruiting. And then over here, this guy that fruited last year for the first time. Oh, I think those are, what is that? Is that scale insects? I don't know what it looks. That's probably some kind of scale insect. And the reason I say that is that ants eat honeydew that scale insects create. So I think I'm going to scrape that off. Yeah, I'm pretty sure. So scale is just a soft-bodied insect that creates like a cage over the top of it. That's like a hard cage. And they suck sap. So I definitely want to get rid of these. But the ants are eating the honeydew. That's usually the sign that you've got something going on. Because they definitely, I mean, they're spotted like ladybirds. Definitely not ladybirds. So I'm going to scrape those off. But this is leafing out. I don't know that it'll flower for me. It did last year and it did produce fruit. We'll see. This one's leafing out as well, and that one back there is flowering. And the pear did flower. Those flowers are fading. It will be interesting to see if this is a self-fruitful tree, so it doesn't need a second one to pollinate. So I know I have bees going at it, but we'll see if it actually keeps its fruit. It did fruit for me one time 2 years ago, and then it aborted every fruit when they got to be about the size of a quarter. And then this plum, these baby plums are getting bigger, so that's a good sign. We'll see what happens. Oh, and look at these freesias. So this is a volunteer freesia that just literally showed up in this pot with the fig about 2 years ago, and I just let it go, and it is huge. Produces so many beautiful flowers, and of course freesia smells amazing. Okay, I'm going to scrape off all those scale insects. That's really gross. And then I'm going to get started planting these tomatoes. The tomatoes are in. So I've set up those 2 stakes. I'll come out tomorrow and rig up the first line of anchoring for the Florida Weave system. I just got more twine for tomatoes yesterday. But the tomatoes are in. Tomorrow will also come out and put up the trellis, the teepee there for that. And then over here, I'm going to do probably another very small Florida Weave system right here for these 5 tomatoes. And then back here, these are bush variety tomatoes, but they will probably benefit from a little bit of staking, but I can just do a single stake on each of these and that should be fine. I did go ahead and plant 2 different blocks of the corn, that one and this one over here. Oddly enough, even though this one's smaller, it's a much faster corn. It's 72 days. This one over here is 98 days. So they definitely won't be tasseling at the same time. I popped some lettuce in the front of this row, and I got these tomatoes in as well as some basil. These guys will go in cages because I have a bunch of cages for them. So I'll get that set up tomorrow as well. And then all of the peppers will go in once I get this bed cleared out and amended. So I have one last project that I want to do. It's in the backyard. Okay, so it's time to switch out these 2 containers. I've pulled out all the muscari from them. I'm going to add fresh soil, and then we're going to pot them up with tomatoes again this year. So last year I grew sun golds, and they grew super tall all the way up and like up in the rafters, and we got tons of tomatoes off of them. So I'm going to try that again, but with 2 varieties this time, 2 different varieties. One is a pole tomato called Pole Sweetie, and the other is a bush variety, Ace 55. So the pole one will go in the back so that it can climb, and I'll come in and put a trellis for it. And then the bush variety will go in the front, but then I'll surround them with, I'm going to put a basil in there as well as more marigolds. So both containers will be the same. What I need to do first though is to fully saturate these containers with water. Even though we've been getting plenty of rain, this area is under an overhang and it dries out. I had the same problem with the 2 containers over by my porch, by my bedroom. They were bone dry and completely hydrophobic. I had to soak them for a long time to get the soil to accept water again because it just repelled it. So I want to do that here because I don't want to. So sometimes when your soil gets hydrophobic, you get this false sense of security, right? You like plant things and you water them and it looks wet on the surface. You're like, oh, everything's good. But then you come back a day later and it's dead. And that's because the soil right underneath that top layer was bone dry. And because it's hydrophobic, it just kind of didn't even soak in. So I'm going to get the hose out right now and I'm going to just saturate these first. Then we'll add soil. Then we'll plant them. As usual, my battery died on my camera, so you didn't get to see all of that, but you can take a look now and I'll show you what I've planted. It's so funny to look at this now and realize that in a couple months it's going to be so dense. So we have the Pole Sweetie in the back, which is going to get a trellis in the next couple days. Then we have cream sausage on one side and Ace 55 on the other, the basil, and then the marigolds. And it's exactly the same over here. The only difference is the marigolds are orange. Okay, that's gonna do it for me today. I'm wiped, it's been a long day and I've been in the sun all day. I'm probably a little bit sunburned even though I wore some sunscreen. Anyway, looking forward to Dahlia Day tomorrow. I really want to get that project done. It'll feel really, really good to have that buttoned up in advance of all the transplanting that's coming up. So thanks so much for hanging out with me today, you guys. I hope you have a wonderful time in your garden and that you can pretty soon put your tomatoes and peppers in. And I'll see you in the next one. Bye.